We will bring you up to date on the coronavirus pandemic, which is, I'm sad to say, accelerating at dramatic speed. In just the past couple of hours, the number of infections worldwide passed 400,000. Now compare that to only 2 days ago when the figure stood at 300,000. We're going to update you on the situation around the world, but let's start in the United States, where in the past few minutes, Donald Trump has again insisted that his country can get back to business in the next month. That is despite a warning from the World Health Organization that the US has more than 51,000 coronavirus cases and that it's at risk of becoming the epicenter of this global pandemic. Well, the US president has been giving his daily update at the White House. Here's some of what he said.
Ultimately, the goal is to ease the guidelines and open things up to very large sections of our country as we near the end of our historic battle with the invisible enemy. It'll go on for a while, but we win. We'll win. I said earlier today that I hope we can do this by Easter. I think that would be a great thing for our country, and we're all working very hard to make that a reality. We'll be meeting with a lot of people to see if it can be done. Easter is a very special day for many reasons. For me, for a lot of our friends, that's a very special day. And what a great timeline this would be. Easter.
So the president there speaking in the last few moments. Right now, the rest of the Trump administration is continuing to give that daily briefing on coronavirus. This comes from the White House. We're continuing to monitor what they're saying, and we'll bring you in all the headlines as and when they come to them. But what I want to do right now is just focus on what the president was saying, because my colleague Gary O'Donoghue in Washington was listening to the president. And Gary, it just sounds very optimistic when the president says, although he caveats it that he is focusing his analysis on data, but that the economy will be back up and running, the US will be back up and running by Easter. That we're talking weeks away.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, in the Christian calendar, Easter Sunday is on April the 12th. So that is around, 3 weeks away from where we are now. Now, the president has mentioned Easter earlier on today. He's been talking for the last couple of days about ending this thing in the next few weeks rather than months. He talked about those who had mentioned months previously as not being realistic. He wanted things up and running before that. In fact, he talked about it being months before that as well, June, July and August he talked about. He did caveat, as you say, later on in his words, which are still going on there, saying that the decisions are driven by what he called the health, safety and well-being of all citizens. But it is a confusing message. The president seems on the one hand to be saying, look, I think we can do this in weeks, in a sense, whatever's going on with the data, but also suggesting that it's all about the health and well-being of the citizens as well. So I think there will be some concern, particularly among the scientists and others. And also in those areas like New York City where things have really spiraled very, very badly. They are really struggling to keep control up there, and they're having to set up temporary hospitals, 1,000-bed hospitals in arts centres like the Javits Centre on the west side of Manhattan. And I think a lot of people will feel here that this is quite premature.
Yes, they certainly will. Gary, for the time being, thank you. Gary just mentioned there New York City, and I want to just unpack some of the figures because it's really important just to understand why it feels a little bit optimistic as to what the president was saying. New York City has nearly 15,000 cases, and if I just bring up this tweet from a reporter from the New York Times, this is from Andy Newman at Andy Local. He is comparing New York State and Italy in this particular tweet, saying that they are now virtually tied when it comes to the figures. Both New York State and Italy have around 105 confirmed cases per 100,000 residents. So it's also worth bearing in mind, however, that New York State is less densely populated than Italy and is also 2 weeks behind Italy. So it just goes to show how far further down the road the New York State is. Now, the governor of New York State has warned that the number of cases was doubling every 3 days, and the peak of the infection could come in as little as 2 to 3 weeks. And let's have a little listen to also what the Mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, was saying about this.
This is my appeal again to the federal government to ensure that we get a lot more. We need thousands more ventilators here in New York City to stay ahead of the curve of this disease and to save lives that can be saved.
Now, away from New York, some clinics in the US have also warned that they face closure because they're running out of equipment, including masks and surgical gowns. One of them is the Open Cities Community Health Center in Minnesota. Here's a spokesperson.
You know, community health centers are essential frontline providers in the response, preparation, and prevention of COVID-19. And as you are well aware, COVID-19 has caused a widespread shortage of personal protective equipment.
So let me just bring you an update from Wall Street, where the Dow Jones recorded actually its biggest one-day percentage gain since 1993. And this percentage gain happened after lawmakers in the state said that they were close to a deal for an economic rescue package. So a little bit of light. Let's go back to Gary, who's monitoring all of this for us. So Gary, it feels like there is a little bit of movement and a little bit more optimism on the US markets, because that rescue package could potentially be agreed.
Yes, just very quickly, just picking up on the PPE, the protective equipment. The President did give some numbers on that. He's talking about 8 million of these sort of N95 masks shipping out this week, 14 million surgical masks, as he put it, and 1.9 million gowns. So he did give some updates on that. But you're right, in terms of the stimulus package being debated by the Senate at the moment, it does seem that they're inching ever closer to a deal. That's looking at around $2 trillion worth of support to the American economy and the American worker. To give you some scale, that's 10% of US GDP, $2 trillion. It's a huge, vast amount of money. I'm not surprised that that has stabilised the markets to some degree. Also, what will have stabilised the markets is the Fed, the Federal Reserve, America's central bank, yesterday effectively saying it would start buying back government bonds and corporate bonds and underwriting the credit markets, the commercial paper and the lending that keeps the liquidity moving round in the system, underwrite that really to an unlimited extent. That will also stabilise the markets somewhat.
OK, let's turn to India now, where a countrywide lockdown has come into effect. This is impacting 1.3 billion people. The restrictions will be enforced for 21 days. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi made the announcement earlier.
हिंदुस्तान को बचाने के लिए,
to save India and every Indian, to save you and your family. From midnight tonight, there will be a total ban on venturing out of your homes.
Well, these stricter containment measures follow a sharp increase in coronavirus cases in India. 519 people are now known to be infected. A further 10 people have died. The BBC's Zubair Ahmed reports from Delhi.
The lockdown has just begun. It is going to be on for 21 days. It is a mammoth task for the authorities to impose the lockdown because, as you say, it's a population of 1.3 billion people. Keeping them indoors for 21 days, it's not going to be easy. But so far, the people have responded well to the appeal of the Prime Minister. As we know that several Indian states and union territories have already been in lockdown for the last few days. So people are getting used to it, and I am told by many people I have spoken to that they will abide by the authorities' appeal, and they will try to stay indoors.
And are the appeals clear? Are the rules clear as to what people have to do?
Mr. Modi, when he addressed the nation for nearly half an hour, tried to explain every little bit to the people of India.
Now let's bring you up to date with the situation with coronavirus in Spain, because there the death toll has jumped by more than 500 in just a single day as the situation in the country quickly worsens. There are now almost 40,000 recorded cases. This is up from a little over 33,000, the number that was just around yesterday. And nearly 3,000 people have died, making Spain the worst affected country in Europe after Italy. Now, a number of emergency measures are being put into place, including the construction of this makeshift hospital. This is in a conference centre, and also an ice rink being used temporarily as a morgue. Well, Guy Hedgecoe has more from Madrid.
The important thing here is that that jump in the number of deaths each day is still getting bigger. The previous jump had been 462. Over the last 24 hours, it's been 514. So you can see that number is still going up. And the authorities very much want to see that taper off. They have warned us that this week is going to be a really key week in the fight against this virus. And they said that we're going to see possibly a continuation of the increase in deaths and those kinds of jumps. But they have also said that they are hoping that the quite restrictive measures they introduced just over a week ago across the country are going to start bearing some kind of fruit. So hopefully within a few days we might start to see those numbers start to taper off slightly.
We'll be back with Guy in a moment, because I want to tell you about Spain's defence minister, who says that a rather distressing development. Staff at some care homes left those homes after the virus was detected, and the army, well, they then during visits found some older people completely abandoned in these homes. Devastatingly, sometimes they even found dead bodies in these beds. Let's get more on this particular aspect from Guy again.
The chief prosecutor is announcing an investigation into all this. It's still not clear how many retirement homes this has happened in and where exactly they are.
Yeah, really difficult development there in Spain. Let's turn to Italy. Our correspondent Mark Lowen has been tweeting about the numbers from there. He's describing them as a mixed bag when it comes to Italy's figures. Deaths up. Daily toll from 601 to 743, but he says that the daily increase in infections is falling again, now down to just over 7%. So although it's a tragic increase in deaths, the actual number, there's a slowing of new cases, and he's describing this as looking like a trend. So if we have a look at this on a graph, it looks like this. Basically, the orange bars are the number of new cases, although you can see today there was a slight increase, but overall they are dropping. The blue line across the bottom there, this is the percentage rate of increase, and that, as you can see, it is still trending downwards. Now, the strict measures the Italian government has taken should push that particular number even lower, and Bloomberg journalist actually tweeted a little bit more detail about this, saying that Italy enforced the lockdown, this really strict lockdown they have, 2 weeks ago. Many of the patients who died in recent days contracted this infection before that. So in theory, what we should be seeing is the effects of the lockdown on the number of hospital and intensive care unit admissions in the next few days. Now, other countries across Europe will also really be watching those particular figures. They want to see what is happening in Italy, because this will shape their own responses to the virus. These are some of the latest pictures from Rome, where police are, well, they're taking tougher measures. They're intensifying their checks. They're using helicopters, flying them frequently over the city, making sure that people are, in fact, abiding by the measures. And that, well, that's a local mayor in Bari in the south of Italy, and this is taking place a few days ago. He's telling that person that you must respect the decree, go home, otherwise the police will come and use force. Now, you've probably seen on social media, mayors around Italy have been venting their frustration in videos online.
You must stay at home. Don't you understand that people are dying? More than 400 people a day are dying. And you're insisting on trying to find tricks to dodge the law and leave your homes?
So there are various mayors, various videos like that. Let's go back to Mark Lowen from Rome.
The Prime Minister tonight has spoken and he has said that he hopes very soon to be able to ease those restrictions in Italy, but he has also said that the fine for violating the rules will be increased, going up from a maximum currently of €206, that's about $230, going up to €3,000, that's about $3,500. So a big hike in fines to try to deter people from going out of their house and from going around without justification.
So the measures being taken in Italy. Now let's turn to France. The death toll there has now passed 1,000. The country is really struggling to keep up with the speed of this pandemic. 5 doctors have died from the illness. There's a lot of concern that not enough protective equipment is available for medical staff. Here's Lucy Williamson.
In places like Mulhouse, it's the very ill who are leaving hospital. Intensive care units here are overflowing. And with dozens more critical cases admitted each day, patients are being sent to Marseille, to Brittany, even to Germany and Switzerland, in a never-ending scramble for beds. And one senior doctor told me that stocks of a key life support drug have virtually run out.
Our health system wasn't ready for this. I'm not sure there's a health system anywhere that's ready for it, because the scale of the crisis is bigger than any system could face. The mechanisms we're putting in place aren't enough.
In the hospital car park, a military field camp has been set up with 30 intensive care beds. Enough to last the hospital here about a day. The government this week tightened quarantine restrictions across the country and introduced a 6-month jail sentence for those who regularly don't comply. The Health Ministry has said the epidemic could start to peak here this week. A doctor working in the heart of the Mulhouse crisis has described it as a huge wave moving west and warned it could saturate hospitals in Paris within days.
That's the snapshot across Europe. Let's turn to Japan, where the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics have been delayed for a year because of the virus. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said he wanted to hold the Games by the summer of 2021 at the latest, as proof that the world has won over COVID-19. It's the first time that the Games have been delayed in peacetime. And his office was tweeting about this. You can look at it on Twitter. They said that the president of the International Olympic Committee and also Shinzo Abe together agreed that the Olympics wouldn't be cancelled but simply delayed. Well, I caught up with Santiago Lange, who's an Argentinian Olympic sailor who won his first gold medal at the Rio Olympics back in 2016. He is at high risk of complications because of surgery that he needed because of cancer. He told me exactly what postponing the Olympics meant for him.
We're all expecting this, as you said, and yeah, I think what the world and the humanity are going on in these days is far more important than our desire to win a medal right now. And so, you know, obviously at the beginning, when there was a little bit of doubt when the games were going to happen, you continue training really hard, and you're at the end of a high athlete. You keep pushing, but nowadays it's clear that the total planet is living and the human being is living. We should leave that aside for a while and you know, no regrets of what's going on.
Absolutely. Interestingly, you've got 2 sons who competed in sailing in Rio. They were also hoping to compete in Japan. So your whole family hugely affected by this. How do you keep up your spirits? How do you look forward to summer 2021?
Well, as I said, we've been pushing very hard, and now, you know, I stay quiet because I really strongly believe that it's things way more important that I can complain. You know, I cannot complain being an athlete waiting for getting back to the sea to train.
Watch out for Santiago and his sons in a year's time.